Make it work. It takes that compromise and resilience, and so that's why we're moving into Ms. Miller. Heather Miller is coming on to um, author, community director, visionary, uh, to talk about 100 ways to love her better. Her book is on Amazon, and every man should have a copy. You can always refer to it. It's a nice little book. It doesn't bankroll you, but there are some things in there that I'm sure that we can improve on. So last week we went over, we talked extensively about, the first date. What does it look like? How, are you supposed to be? You're 3 months into a relationship. You're 6 months in. What does the relationship really looks like? How do you navigate a strong and healthy relationship? Because we have to get to the point to where relationships are being built versus
Indeed.
versus it being humped on, or oh, I just saw you and this was a drive by, I came through, or you know what I mean, like really, because this is what our families, and we have to fix family, and this is an area that we can fix family. And so you're more than welcome to stay, brother. I really appreciate you, and
Thank
for
you for
coming
having
on.
me.
Yes, thank you. Your insights were just right on point, inspiring. And I made the church comment, by the way.
I saw that. Yeah. Well, if you
Right.
guys will have me, I'm happy to hang around, and unless you guys want to, I don't want to interrupt the flow of the program.
Oh, you're good.
Oh no, stay,
Yep,
stay.
you're good.
And thanks for the recap and the introduction, Calvin.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so I am a personal change coach. It has been 25 years in the making. So it's been my personal journey, my study, my training that has given me some of the insight. And the other part of it is my spiritual connection, my spiritual grounding, which is my foundation for everything that I do. And the first and greatest discovery, well, I'm going to give you three. The first and greatest discovery is self discovery. The second is having a strong foundation with a spiritual source by whatever name you choose. I use God, I use spirit, I use that interchangeably, but I speak to direct relationship, not a third party relationship, not having a pastor or some other leader as my intermediary between me and God. It is a direct communication, it is a conversation, it is a study, it is a download. And I see my sister Jamie Gabriel on too, and we have that in common, listening and taking the insights that you're given and applying it to your life because it's for you first. But none of our gifts are ours to keep. Our gifts are to be given. They're present, right? It's your presence that you give as your gift. The gift was given to you to be a gift to the world. And so as we keep those gifts to ourselves, we miss an opportunity and purpose. We miss an opportunity to grow, and we miss an opportunity to help build and strengthen our world. So I think that was a large part of what you shared today in terms of your experience, your expertise, and your gifts are designed to help improve and build the world. So your gift of fatherhood, your gift and expertise around financial matters, all of those are gifts that were not just for you, but you applied them to your life first. And then you're able to help other people. And I think that kind of is a good segue into how we understand um, each other in relationships. So that grounding is necessary. You have to be accountable to a source higher than yourself. If you are not, your ability to be a good, faithful, committed mate is going to be very much challenged because there's always going to be something to come by to sway you one way or the other and nothing to bring you back and ground you. And I think in relationships that's a big part of kind of the things that impulsively affect our ability to stay committed, stay in faithful relationships, to take our vows more seriously as the time passes, to look at them, especially if you've been remarried. So I really want to talk a little bit more today on a couple of different areas. I want to talk about men who've been in long-term relationships, whether that's a marriage for more than 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I want to speak to you today. I want to speak to men who have a commitment type of phobia or disinterest in commitment because you have a side piece and probably a main dish somewhere. I want to speak to men today who have been divorced, and so you're gun shy about marriage again, and the challenges that we might face, whether it's, you know, raising a family, having children, or being in a committed relationship and having that level of trust for women again. So those are the kind of topics I would like to talk about today in our part 2. I still want to interweave some of the insights from the book. A couple of things to know, just to point out, so when you actually get the book, you'll have a chance to start somewhere. So in 100 Ways to Keep Your Woman or Regain Her Love is the name of the book. And in that book, you can start anywhere. But the beginning gives you tools and insights to go unafraid into the 100 ways. So just kind of a recap from last week, we talked about the love language, which is kind of part 1 of the book, understanding your own love language so that you can then understand her love language and understand where you fit, where your priorities are in terms of how you extend love. The other topic that is important is that you establish values about what love really is, not just the visual or stimulating part, but what it means in terms of a foundation and where you might go to look for the information. So personally, one of the tools that I use is 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And most people have heard this before. It starts off with love is patient, love is kind. And so that whole chapter is such an amazing beginning to establishing values around what love is. And I think that's a really important discussion that we had last week in part 1. And then I think the last thing we talked about was the different types of relationships that people have and the different levels of beginning, and like you mentioned before, when you first connect with someone, what that means, how it makes you feel, where that relationship can go from the initial point of view, from the initial impressions, and then how it moves up through more commitment as you go up the scale for how you begin to appreciate the person even that much more, enough to give them that time and attention that you would do as you mature in your relationship. So, okay. Calvin, did you want to interject?
Nope. Let's get started. Let's get started, right? Because you know how I feel about this. I think it's important that we really drive home the relationship aspects, period. We're too far apart in this individual mindset era, and we have to get back to family. So Let's do it.
Okay. So I want to talk first to I'm just going to say the spirit of the men who have been in long-term relationships. And I think one of the components of people who have been in long-term relationships, and I'm speaking marriage particularly, that you've been with the same person, you believe that you know everything about that person, you believe that that person either doesn't want to change, hasn't been motivated to change, or that they're stuck or set in their ways. And I also want to point out that in those long-term relationships, you have been through some things. So your mate or your partner has seen you at your very best, and they have seen you at your very worst. And part of committed relationships for long-term like that, and why people stay together, typically it starts off with children. Once you have a relationship or you're building a family together, your collective goal might be to make sure that they have a stable environment, that you've done all you could to shelter them, to protect them, to give them the best start in life as possible. And then you then put on your I'm back to having a self. I'm back to having some identity of my own outside of being a parent. And typically people don't feel that way until their children have left the house, right? So you're always going to be a parent. You're always going to build on the parenting relationship, and you're always going to try to come together as a couple to do that the best way you can. And so sometimes what happens to us in long-term relationships is we get stuck in doing a certain thing a certain way. And so and I'm not saying this is everybody, but this is one of the challenges that a lot of people in long-term marriages have, is that they forget, one, the identity of self, which, speaks to a new level, a new understanding of self-love and self-care and self-discovery. Because all of the time that you spent in the marriage, all the time that you spent parenting, there were lessons that you were gaining and experiencing during that time. What we tend to do is walk through those lessons. We really don't absorb them because we really don't feel like we have enough time. I have to hit it and keep moving. I do it and I keep moving. But we don't give ourselves enough time to go back and reflect on those times. And we don't give ourselves enough time to reflect on those things together. And so I think that that's one of the places where we can get stuck and being in long-term relationships and commitments. So one of the first steps I would suggest for men to do, and we hear jokes about this. We hear about midlife crisis. We hear about menopause. We hear about all these different transition periods in life. But what it really means is that you are physically changing, just like you have been mentally changing over a period of time. What we do is typically get into a routine and get stuck in that rut. And so part of reclaiming your marriage, reclaiming your relationship, is to reclaim yourself first. So that is a change in your diet, a change in your exercise, a change in your routine, a change in your interests, to build on those things that make you who you are and reestablish who that might be. Those are signals that you are changing and it's time for you to reestablish who you are. So in menopause, especially for women, your biology is completely out of control, right? For some people, the experience can be different for different women, but it's that time that says, okay, there's some things I need to reestablish, rethink, because I feel very emotional, I feel very vulnerable, and there are things happening to my body that may be opposite of what I experienced becoming a mature or seasoned woman. And so now I have to think about things differently. And so being able to have that conversation that's not in anger, because now you're reacting to something out of emotion, and it's more important that you acknowledge it out of more reason, out of, this is an experience, just like and we haven't, there was no magic wand that because you actually gave birth that you had the instruction manual on being a father or the instruction manual on being a mother. It is a becoming. All of the roles that we play, although very significant, husband, wife, because you got married doesn't mean that you've already mastered that role. And that's a very important misnomer that we have. Yes, I am a wife, but the role of what wife is to this husband is going to evolve over time. And if we don't give that to ourselves to do, if we don't get to know what the needs of our husbands are, and husbands don't get to know the needs of our wives, then we kind of start to run into a bit of chaos. We start to run into some levels of regret. We start to run into some levels of denial. It's not my fault, it's her fault. She's the one that's different now. He's the one that's different now. And then we get into this tug of war about blame and who was really the same, and now you're different, and now you treat me this way, and you used to buy me flowers. Well, yeah, I did, but I did that to get you. Now you can get your own flowers. Or okay, so now I'm not getting you flowers, but I'm paying the gas bill, I'm paying for your hair to get done. That's my flower to you. Again, that's when understanding a person's love language becomes more important. And you can actually change your love language over time. And when you're in long-term relationships, that your love language changes over time. So maybe your love language was affection. So there are 5 love languages. I'll just run through those right quick so you guys will have just a refresh on what that means. There is quality time. There is acts of service. There's affection, gifts, and affirmation or compliments. So if these are the primary 5 love languages, one of them is your priority, but over time, that priority may change. So if your primary love language was affection, now your language maybe after 10, 12 years with the same person touching you, maybe that's not such a priority anymore. Maybe acts of service is more of a priority to you, which acts of service is about helping to lighten the person's load. So what you can do to make their path, their day, their work, their responsibilities easier. It might just be a positive word. It might be a compliment. It might be any number of those things, but understanding what that is at the time in your relationship now is important. Because again, we are going to change. We're going to flex and pull and bend and stretch and break at points. And you have to recognize and give your mate that opportunity to be that new person and not to have to conform to the same role, the same way that it's always been. And then exploring more about your self-care. This is really important for men, especially that have been in long-term relationships, because you can get very complacent with your mate if your wife is that type of person who feels committed to making sure your clothes are clean, that your doctor's appointments are scheduled, that your meals are made and they're healthy, and that that the environment that you create together, these are my roles and this is your role. So it's important to revisit that thinking, revisit those roles, revisit that what you think might be a comfort level, but it actually might be resentment for being cast in a way that maybe now that's not where you are. Maybe now that's not what you're thinking. Maybe your kids are old enough where you don't have to cook an elaborate meal every day. Maybe you only want to cook maybe 2 or 3 times a week. How do you make the adjustment? How do you have a conversation? That's really, really important in understanding your love language. And also for long-term relationships, we have to revisit it. Oh, Calvin, I thought you were going to comment.
No, I'm still following you, but I threw something in there. I see Jamie threw something in there, but I wanted to make sure that I threw in there. How do we keep our love consistent?
Well, some of the tools for doing that, again, the first one is knowing the person's love language and giving people room to grow and change. Having the conversation about where you are now and not having the expectation because you were there 6 months ago or 6 years ago that you'll still there today. So keeping it consistent means to keep having conversations, revisit it. When you have vacation or you have that special time set aside that you can look forward to, these are conversations that you have when you're walking on the beach. You know, I'm considering changing my career. Okay, these are conversations that you have when you go for your walk or you're sitting in the park. So part of keeping it consistent is keeping it alive and keeping it healthy. Just like you would do any plant, any garden, you have to nurture it and cultivate it. It doesn't stay the same. Even though it might be stationary, it might be there, right? But you still have to cultivate it. So that's one of the ways, or a few of the ways that you can do that.
Right. So for the average, like, because it's a lot of men, like I said last week, we get in these roles, we get comfortable, right? And we do get into this blame game, right? And it's funny how you recognize it, right?
Yes.
You will look at her and say, "Oh man, she changing." You know what I mean? She tripping, and all you did was redo your hair. You know what I mean? It could be something as small as that. And I think it comes from an area of fear where we're not doing anything. And if both people are not doing anything, it's easy to point back and forth on whose fault it is because we're not doing the work to bring us right back to learning what's our new love language. We're not bringing us back to touch. We're not bringing us back to having conversation because all we did was spend all our time talking to the kids, spend that time helping get the kids to the next level and going to work every day. And then you coming home and then you got these little quickies and then you got, you got all these little things that is taking place where you're not taking the time for each other.
Absolutely.
Right. And so what do we need to do to really focus on taking that time for each other? Because, for us, and it's important for us to have the physical intimacy. And for you, it's important for you to have the words, the touch, the conversation, that foreplay, that intimacy. Oh, you look beautiful. Oh, you look at, so it's important for you to have those tools. So how do we really work ourselves? What 2-3 steps we need to work ourselves back to that?
Okay, so it's going to really depend on the 3 different relationships that we're talking about today. So if we're talking about a couple that's been in a long-term relationship, and after sometimes in a long-term relationship, the fire, the passion, the excitement of that relationship, and some people might say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, you don't realize or recognize that it is broken. She might be broken. And so if she's broken, she can't give you what you need, and you can't give her what she wants. And it's a vicious cycle that spirals, and it gets painful, and it's a grind to be in the same space with that person, in the same relationship with that person, let alone in the same bed with that person. And then you start to see, the separations. Well, you have this room and the kids have moved out now, so I'm going to take so and so. You have those kinds of levels of division. And so, but both of you have to be willing, or somebody has to be willing to take those steps further. And at different points, even in those long-term relationships, one or the other is in that space. But if you're not, like you talked about, giving them the foreplay that they need, you need foreplay to initiate these new levels of relationship. And foreplay meaning being in a person's mind and meeting them in their wants and meeting them in their needs. As you do that, you build the trust, you build the understanding, you build the willingness to go the extra mile. That's why this particular book is called 100 Ways to Keep Your Woman or Regain Her Love. Or regain her love. Because after a while, she may love you, but she may not love you. Or she may love you, but she may not like you, right? Because you've been through this journey together. And so a couple of points you asked for. Okay. So one is you have to start building the foreplay. And I'm not talking about short term, because if you are really serious and committed, it takes 10 to 21 days to form a new habit or a new behavior. It takes 63 consecutive days for that habit to become a lifestyle. So between 21 and 63 days worth of activities, of commitment, of consistency, you have to put in the time, you have to get through the grind, because it can be. Because if this is something that you've been doing for a long period of time, it can be a grind. And so you want to make sure that you're putting in the time and staying consistent, because you have to show that you're serious, and you have to show that you're committed to this new interest or revitalization of that relationship. I do think it was something, okay. Very true. Love language has changed over time for both men and women. Yes, indeed. And so I think that's, you have to have that laid as a foundation first, because if you jump into it, you can do 2 or 3 things and you're like, okay, well, she's not responding to me. Well, no, because now you're rebuilding and reestablishing trust. You're rebuilding and reestablishing your identity. She needs to see who you are. She needs to remember why you got together in the first place. And I know that's a two-way street. So I'm speaking to men, husbands, and fathers, but also if there are women listening, it's the same for us too. But we have to be committed to that process.
Yeah, you most definitely have to. The backside of that, right, is what we talked about last week, right? So the push-ups, the sit-ups, the working out, right? You got to keep that energy up. You got to see that's part of your foreplay. Taking care of yourself is part of your foreplay. We were having the discussion earlier, just in the area of if I'm taking care of myself, support me in taking care of myself. If she's taking care of herself, support her in taking care of herself. Use your words to build her up and she build you up. I think we get into these relationships and these euphoric relationships. Oh, we're running on the beach butt naked. You know what I mean? Everybody just is beautiful, right? And then you got to, sooner or later it breaks down and now you got to have this relationship and now you got to be able to be diplomatic and communicate properly. My next question would be, as a man, you in this long-term relationship, you got 10 years, you really haven't asked her to marry you, right? So to me, I think when you're with someone 2-3 years, automatically they deserve that opportunity. That's just been my philosophy. My family comes from, it's better to marry than to burn, right? So get yourself together because you've been with this person long enough. Obviously, it's something you care about with this person that you spent this much time with. Now, you could have gotten comfortable where she didn't. So walk us through that process where you really need to, as they would say the old way, piss or get off the pot. You really need to have made this decision. Some people always want, again, we back to YouTube. They saw on YouTube, we getting married is just a piece of paperwork, no, let's talk about the covenant that the marriage brings and how we can move you to that.
I think that's awesome. So just in long-term, non-married relationships, it's important that you understand each other's values, again, around what love is and what marriage is and what a commitment means to you. Because it could be that in your family, like you were just talking about, your family history is a marriage commitment. There are families whose families are not marriage commitment. They consider themselves common law, and that's enough. And so if that's acceptable in your family, that's going to likely be acceptable in that relationship. And then you have some other issues like fear, if you've been in relationships before, that people change after they're married, right? That commitment, somehow that person changes. Now they have access to my finances. They have, a lot of those kinds of thoughts may be impacting that decision. And so I just want to kind of segue into the side piece and the main dish conversation, because I think this is a good time to segue into that. So, because I think it's a related topic. So
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Typically, the side piece satisfies an immediate need that, and this is whether it's a male or female, but I'm going to focus on the men having a female or male having a female as a side piece. That she fulfills whatever that need is. Typically, if a man has a side piece, he has a main dish. So it's someone that he has established more of the values that he wants long term, but is still pulled or drawn by the things that maybe the main dish doesn't have or doesn't do, but the side piece will do. And with hopes of something growing out of being a side piece. And sometimes it's not necessarily an intentional mindset. Sometimes there are women who are independent, who don't want to be in a community relationship, who want a strictly sexual relationship with a man. At least that's what she's going to tell herself, right? That I really don't need a man. I just need the sexual release from this engagement with him. That's just really 98% not really true. Her truth is, I'm afraid to commit to somebody, or I'm afraid to trust somebody. So this is enough for me right now as I continue to look at my options and weigh my options, or wait for somebody else who has more of what I want to come along. And we talked about that a little bit last week too, about how we tend to put a full person together by multiple people, by having multiple relationships who satisfy multiple needs, when we're trying to find one person to have all of those needs met. And so, but part of the process is, if you have the shared values and you really take the time to vet those values, to see if you're really in alignment, to see if the value that a person really has is that value, then even as a side piece, you can actually move up to the main dish, right? If your values align. But with a side piece, part of the challenge is that showing that level of value. And I guess it's kind of the thought of, if you have if you're getting the milk from the cow, why buy it? So if you're already getting, if your idea of an epitome of a relationship is a strong, sexually healthy woman, if that's all you want, then then your idea of a side piece is going to be okay with you. That's going to meet that particular need, but is it meeting her need? And is she giving energy to a relationship that doesn't have any real mobility? And why would you do that? And so I think on both parts, it's a matter of values, a matter of establishing values, and again, establishing what love is, and establishing your own worth, your own value. Because at some point you need to make that decision. Is it going to be just a physical relationship? If it is, it needs to have a time frame. It needs to say, okay, I'm here because I have this need right now. But once you get beyond a few months or beyond a year, you really need to think about that, because now you have this spiritual tie, because you have come together as one unit, two individuals coming together in that sexual intimacy puts a strain on being apart. So the more that you're together that way sexually, the more transfer of energy that you have, the more connected that energy is, and the more difficult it is to separate yourself, because it meets a need. It becomes a habit. Now remember, it takes 10 to 21 days to form a new habit and a new behavior, and 63 consecutive days for it to become a lifestyle. So once you get beyond 2 or 3 months having this kind of side piece relationship, now you're kind of vested in that. Now you're used to the phone call at 10, 11, 12 o'clock, saying that, okay, I'm swinging by for about 30 minutes, or I'm dropping in, and, this is my expectation, or, have no words and just show up, and you'll be okay with that. Well, at some point, for him and for her, you have to establish some boundaries, that I choose not to be your side piece. If I don't have potential for the main dish, I don't want to be the side dish. I don't want to be one of many on somebody's list of needs being met. And I don't want to have multiple men, because we get into more health issues and health concerns as we go deeper into those pathways. But part of, again, the strategy is to reassess where you are. After 21 days of being with someone, you need to know where that relationship is going. And I'm not talking about promises. I'm talking about real action steps, real conversations, real communication, real investment. So 21 days into that relationship, and you can start your 21 days at the first of the month. If you have been a traditional side piece, let the first of the next month establish your 21 days. You can start there, and you can start to assess now if you're still in that relationship, so that when it comes to the first, if you have this conversation, okay, you know, we've had fun, but I really want to be with someone who's going somewhere, who like I can build with, who we can work together and build something strong and real. So, and then you need to start the work, the self work, the healing of pulling back your spiritual connection to that person, because that's going to be more painful trying to pull away from somebody that you've been intimate with. That's going to be a lot more painful than and that's part of what happens in divorces too, because you've been with this person for so long. Typically you've been with only that person for that period of time, and so even as the side piece, having a desire to be the main dish, that it's still a pulling apart of it, and you really feel it. So you have a tendency to go back, right? You have a tendency to relapse and say, oh, okay, well, you know, we haven't been together in about 2 weeks. He might have come to his, you know, he might come to a position where he really wants to be with me. Well, yeah, part of that routine, that new habit had set in, and you're part of that new habit. So it may or may not be something authentic and real if you don't have the values to vet against what that means. So you need to have that value established to make sure that your decision and your choices together, right, if it should be something that you continue on together. Again, you have to set these boundaries. And I advise you to set that boundary for the next first of the month. So you have time to assess it. You have time to start getting yourself prepared that if it's not going in this direction, and it's not that I just want to be with somebody, and I'll take anybody for now. Your for now is an opportunity where you're meeting your actual relationship that you might be in, because you're connected mentally and looking at the person that you're with. Even though you might think that, okay, well, I'm open to relationships. Well, if you were open to relationships, you would actually be open. You would actually be, you know, your mindset would be different, where your focus is on having something real. But you have to know what it is that you want. You have to know who it is that you want. You need to have some idea about what complements you. And the only way you know that is through finding out who you are and your own self-love and your own self-care. And so for men, it's the same thing. You have to know who you are, what you want, and not just, and you think that you're getting something, but you're actually giving something every time you come together with that person that is your side piece. And sometimes we know that those relationships can become very stressful and tenuous, right? Sometimes you get the psycho babes come out of that, right? The ones that follow you and stalk you and say that you made this commitment to them during pillow talk, and you know you promised that you were going to do this and be this and all of that, and those promises come back to haunt you because you were just pillow talking. You were trying to make this really intimate moment to get where you wanted to get, thinking that that was all that was going to be required. Well, no. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you find yourself in a challenge of, maybe now she is conceiving your child, right? That may not have been something on your list, but it was a circumstance of your choice. And so, and you really didn't want to choose to have your side piece as the mother of your child. And we have lots of cases of that. Lots of cases of that. Well, she knows that, and guess what? Now you're going to pay. You're going to be forever connected to her through your child and through your child support. And so, that can become a whole different dynamic. And so you have to be careful that who you choose to be intimate with has the same material of the person that would be a good mother to your child. That's so important. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. So now you have that scenario, right? Wow. Being a guilty party, right? Being a guilty party, and me and Two Man, we wide open with the conversations and the honesty, and when you are in that position, I think I know, right? we kind of use our words, we talk ourselves into these positions, right? When we just really there for the game, right? The Bible says, "Sweet is the nectar," right, of being in someone else's backyard, right? Picking someone else's fruit, so to speak, right? Um, oh man, your French fries taste way better than my French fries, right? And we we and this is just from a male's point of view. I, we are looking for the very things that we're talking about in a relationship, and you knowing how to make me feel good. See that side piece has given me the attention that you haven't given me because you caught in that rut or whatever the case you may be, right? And so all of a sudden, she say, "Oh, you look good. I see you get your hair done," or, "Oh, look, oh, that's nice. You got on." She started hitting you, right? Because you gotta understand the numbers. We have been pulling and pulling and throwing away males and throwing away fathers and destroying boys, and right, we're pulling these numbers away from family, right? The reason why we preach kids need both parents is because we need our boys to be men, to be husbands, to be fathers.
Absolutely.
Not criminals, dope fiends, drunks, dead at 32, 31, 42, 48, died of liver poison, right? And so we look out and we say, "Oh yeah, here go the numbers. It's so," right? So we go to plan, not realizing the damage that we're doing to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So how do we really keep the triggers as a male? Besides your book, throw me a bone here, Miss Miller. Throw me a bone and tell me, I got this situation. I really like her, but she don't flirt back. She doesn't. She don't want to pray. Right? How do I express myself to get her to do the things that I like, so I can stay in, so I can love her better? I got your book. I read your book. I'm doing all these things, right? But how do I get her to reciprocate?
Okay, well, so first we need to know who you are. So are you already in a long-term relationship? Are you trying to move from side piece to main dish? Or are you a divorced or separated man who's gun shy about marriage?
I'm in a relationship. I want to be in the relationship. So, because if I ain't in a relationship, it's terror on everybody. So let me be in the relationship. I know
Okay.
me.
So this is kind of a courting relationship, or
Yes.
okay, so you met a
No, we're
woman.
married. We're married.
Oh, we're
Yeah,
okay.
we're married. And these are the things that I really need, that I've expressed. So like I said, I've been using your book. I'm winning. I'm doing all those things, but I need that reciprocation. How do I get her to really wake up and reciprocate back to me?
Well, I would say the first thing you need to do is on an up period of time, you have those conversations. So you create intimate moments to have those kind of conversations. You go out to dinner, you talk about, you talk about how, she's attractive to you and authentically. So there's something about every woman that is a draw, because we're by divine design designed that way. It could be our curves, it could be our color, it could be the softness of our skin, it could be the fullness of our lips, it could be the brown in our eyes, it could be how our hands feel when they touch you. You need to find the authentic things that you like and love and desire, more importantly, about her. When you start to feed her and she starts to feel like a sexual being with you, she feels like a desired woman with you, you can begin to shift and mold that. But if you can't get her there, if you can't be authentic and draw that out in her, you're going to have some challenges, because she's going to have some trust issues. Because remember, regardless of where we are in our relationship, we all have a backstory. So if she's been married before, these might be triggers. right, that cause her to fear or have some anxiety about it, if she had no other man before you, then she has no other experience, and that could also be a trigger for her. So I never had anybody before, but I've heard all these experiences that I'm not having with you. So she needs to be able to have that conversation, but it's very difficult because the male ego is so easily bruised, so easily hurt.
Ain't that right? Come on.
Yes, yes, very fragile. But if you set the tone to have those kind of conversations, I mean, and you have to have it on an upswing. So you need to have it when both of you are in a good mood, when you have created this environment for this conversation or for this level of intimacy to be exchanged and exposed. If you don't create that environment, remember, she has everything that she's carrying in her head. So she has you in there. Okay, I'm gonna give him about 30 minutes. We get a quickie in. He'll be okay for the next 2 days. You got stuff like that in your head. And what she needs to do is have a clear mind. She needs to have no worry, no stress. And that's what 100 Ways is helping you to create for her. These points that help her find you more attractive, to help her know that you got her back, to help you know how to lighten her load, because the less she has on her mind, the more time she has to focus on your needs and wants to focus on those needs. If she has to wash the dishes, cook the food, put the kids in order, put the house in order, clean up the room before you got, all of those things are all distractions that sit on her mind. And she's working, and there are bills to be paid, or she's going to school, or she has these other activities happening in her life. You have to lighten her load. So the first thing you have to do is figure out how to do that, and do that in a consistent way, and then create these moments so that you can have the conversation. You know what? I know your family may not have, been keen on oral sex, but you know what it does for me? Man, it makes me feel like you're with me, I'm with you, and that's what does it for me. My biggest turn on is that. And so she'll start to thinking, okay, well, maybe if I'm not doing it and he likes it so much, maybe somebody else is going to do it for him. And so what she doesn't want, especially if you're increasing and lessening her load, but increasing the intimacy and the space for that intimacy, you can have a woman do whatever you want her to do if you give her what she needs.
Right. So that's the reciprocation. So both of you have to figure out how to lighten each other's load so you can enjoy each other's care.
No, you have to do that. No, so I'm saying that the male has to create that space, because it's a trust issue. It's a vulnerability issue. So depending on what her backstory is and what you know about that backstory, which you should be asking questions to make sure you know what that backstory is, so that you can find those ways and use those tools to be effective. But if you say you love her, if you say you want to be in a relationship with her, then do it. Do the work. The same type of impact that you would have by going to work every day and staying consistent and making sure you have a roof over your head and making sure your financial needs are taken care of. All of those things, you still need to do that for her. You have to initiate it. You have to create the space, and then allow her to then start to build that up. So she may already be in that space and you're not in that space. So there may be times where she's giving these things to you and you don't even recognize it, because you may not appreciate the expression of the love language that she's sharing with you. So maybe she thinks, making sure your clothes are ironed is like the cat's meow. Maybe she just thinks that, my mother did this for my father. I've seen this done, and I think, he doesn't have to worry about that, or I take his clothes to the dry. She may really think that she's doing something major in terms of foreplay for you, but that may not be your expression of love language, but it doesn't mean that's not her expression to you. And if you don't recognize it and you miss her expressions to you, you can shut her down that way, just like she can shut you down that way. That's why it's really important to pay attention to that and have those conversations where you create intimate moments to have deeper conversations that are non-threatening, that you don't take it so personal that you shut down or you turn off or you say, you know what, forget it. You don't want to get to those points.
So, okay, we got that, right? So
Mhm.
that's okay, I'll take that lesson, right? So you're taking that lesson, you're applying all those tools, and now you're winning, right? Now we're back to euphoria, right?
Okay.
We're back to euphoria. Since we're moving into the final stages of part two, um, I would like for you to share to those who are in a long-term relationship, like you said, um, the the what are the benefits of taking your relationship to a marriage? Bing, bang, boom, bow.
Well, actually, if you have two committed people who are committing to building something together, you have a partnership within your marriage. So that partnership may be a business partnership. Everybody has some skill set that they bring that's of value. So utilizing that skill set in your marriage with a partner that you can trust, that you can talk business and still have breakfast in the morning together, uh, that's a benefit. That you have someone who is your pillow talk, right? That you can share your intimate thoughts, or where somebody else might think it's crazy thinking, or some things that you might not be able to take to your friends because it might be directly about them. You can take that to a partner who you can trust, who you expect not to hear anything that you talk about in your pillow talk from any other places. So it gives you a confidant in your own household that you can have these kind of conversations with. It gives you, and I hear this a lot, your ride or die chick, right? You have that person that's going to be there with you regardless of the road that you travel, regardless if it's in sickness or in health, regardless of if the finances fall or your company closes or your health challenges increase. You have somebody that is there with you. There's nothing like going through a trauma, a loss of a loved one, a health condition, a serious medical condition, that you have somebody there who you know cares enough about you to stay by your side and help you get through those tough times. Those are at least three good benefits to having a marriage, a committed marriage relationship.
I like
Because,
those three.
okay,
I,
okay,
I
good.
like those three. I think those three really hit it on the nail. I think it's important that, especially the honesty part. When you build trust and you build honesty, you got to be able to get out of your own way. Gotta you gotta throw aside all the little lies that you've been playing with, all the little falsities where, yeah, I'm this, I'm that. You got to move all that out the way in order for that connection to be authentic, right? And
Mhm.
I most definitely know, after my experiences, whew, after being through, having gone through so much, right? Understanding that when you do all of that, it doesn't, it's in your way. So like I said last week, the first person you lie to is yourself. If you're lying to yourself, you're corrupting your spirit. Bottom line. Sorry, I had to learn that again. And as I was telling Quinn, using the gift for all the wrong reasons, God is showing us right now, and this is real, and this is how we're winding down. But God is showing us right now how broken we truly are.
Indeed.
How we've been divided structurally from just reactionary, from you know, across the board. We can go reactionary, drugs, policies. We can name a number of things, but ultimately, during this fatherhood unity month, it's to give these men the tools to take the lead, to celebrate themselves, to value themselves. It's like when Robin asked me about Great Britain, what is the first thing I would tell a young father? And it's to love himself. How do you love yourself? Really, is being honest with yourself. I knew I was a piece of doo doo. You know what I mean? That where I was wrong. I knew I wasn't right. Right. And I was very comfortable in being uh, manipulative of myself. So knowing that in order to have these healthy relationships that last for a long time, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with the person and the mate. We have to get rid of the games, all the little games you come to the table with, trying to figure out if this person, okay, no, let's get to this first wall. Let's get to this second wall. Let's get to that third wall. Let's get to that fourth wall. So I thank you. I would love for you to leave where they can reach you. Your last words, I know you got some beautiful words to say, but your
Uh,
last words and tell us where they can get your book and everything.
okay, thank you. The first thing I want to say is that as you are navigating a relationship that's moving into a commitment, you have to have, and I don't tell people this often about things they have to do. I always ask you to consider, but this is a must. You must have God in your relationship. God must be the third party in your relationship, because what works is when you have difficulty with your spouse or your mate, you take it once you have the basic conversation with your mate, you take it to God and let God work on them, because God sees things in them for them that you cannot. God can help change and soften a heart and get someone to listen where you cannot. If you never take it there, that conversation is not happening, because part of that is our lesson about us, our lesson about when we're talking about fatherhood, and I'm speaking of God the Father in this way, that when we respect that relationship, we can respect our physical fatherhood relationship. It's very important that we understand the interconnection between a heavenly father and a physical father. When we say that we are committed and we want to have a relationship with God, guess what you're saying also is that you want to have a relationship and committed to your physical father. So don't try to disconnect them when they're intended to be connected. So it's important that in your relationship that God is your source of sustenance, and because the vows that you take are in front of to God for your spouse and for the people who are present as your witnesses. So never think that your relationship, your marriage relationship, that is what brings it under covenant. That is what brings the blessing. But you have to activate the covenant. It works the same when divorced. The covenant is still with God, even though you may not be with that person anymore. But the commitment that you made for care and concern for that person doesn't change because you got divorced. And when you get in trouble, part of that reason that we have such bitter divorces is that we don't recognize again the source for who we set that covenant with. And so I am Hetheru, a personal change coach. You can visit me on YouTube and take a look at some of my videos there. I have a series of blog talk radio shows, which you can actually Google me and find my books. You can Google me and find my blog talk shows, my articles, my website, which is yourinspiredjourney.com. You can find a phone number so that we can connect. And if you know that your journey and part of this COVID crisis was an awakening of the things that you really want to do and want to be in the relationships you want to have, that's what a personal change coach helps you to navigate. So I help you to navigate that system through workshops, through trainings, and through one-on-one sessions. So find me, look me up. I'm on Facebook. Not committed to Facebook, but I'm there. You can also connect to my YouTube videos to find more information. You can also join me on my website, is yourinspiredjourney.com. And if you don't remember any of those things, you can also Google me under Hetheru Miller. My books are on Amazon, and I have great tools and resources for your journey. So thank you again, Calvin, for allowing me to stay with you this month for part 2. And I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to acknowledge my own father and the father figures that I've had in my life. And I honor them this month. I honor you and your role as father, and your role as father, not to your own children, but to many. And so I thank you for the opportunity again to be here, and for all the work that you do to help raise our boys to be men, husbands, and fathers. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We're glad to have you. I guess that says it all. This has been the Fatherhood Unity Month, brought to you by Campaign for Black Male Achievement and United Way. My name is Calvin Mann, president and founder of Encourage Me I'm Young and Good Fathers Only. Good night.